Hey guys, welcome back to the BMW Blog podcast and welcome to Orlando. We're actually here today at PSI, Precision Sport Industries, and I'm joined by Sean Myers, President and CEO of PSI. So why are we here today? Well, let me start with a quick story before we dive into all these topics, Sean.
Sure.
So give me a few seconds to tell people why am I here today? Because a few months ago, I sent over to you my BMW 1M. As you guys know, it's quite rare. It's my jewel. It's my precious. I love that car. And I wanted Sean to take a look at the car and see if there is any preventive maintenance, if there is anything I need to fix on the car. I've had it since 2011. I'm a first-time owner. I took care of the car as best as I could. But then, of course, I am not a professional when it comes to fixing cars or maintenance and all of that. And I wanted to bring it down to you because this is what you do. So with that being said, the idea came to mind, can we shoot this on video and show people what it means to own any BMW, maybe not just a special one, and the type of things that you should be looking at, type of things you should be maybe changing on the cars if needed or preventing things. We're going to have a video on the 1M, and we're going to show you some of the things in that video as well. But today in this podcast, I really wanted Sean to just kind of tell you what it means to do this preventive maintenance and things that you should look at a car like a pre-inspections, right, Sean, and all these things if you buy the car or even if you own the car. So with that being said, let's start first maybe with just the history of PSI. Tell me, how long have you been doing this? And then we can talk about some other things.
Yeah, so I started the shop in 2008. It was born out of a hobby. I've always had quite a bit of cars. My dad had a bunch of cars growing up, street rods. So I had a shop. We worked on things, worked on my stuff. I had an E36 M3 very early on, E46 M3 as well that we used to modify. And people heard I was working on cars with buddies of mine, and people started bringing me parts and saying, hey, I don't know where to take my BMW. The dealership won't put these springs on. The dealership won't do this exhaust. Will you guys do it? And I said, yeah. And that's kind of how it started. And then it quickly grew into actually where we are now. In 2009, we moved here. This is the Winter Park location. And I was here for 10 years. We outgrew the space. And we moved to our Oviedo location, which is about a 13,000 square foot facility. We were there today. Mm-hmm. And I have this location, and I moved back here. Someone else was here, and I was able to come in and once they left and buy the equipment, and they had put a dyno in. So I have a dyno here in the ground, and have these two locations. So now I have two locations in Orlando. They're about 45 minutes to an hour apart based on traffic to serve to Central Florida and the country. I mean, we get a lot of cars sent from all over, just like your 1M. I mean,
Chicago.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's not unique. I mean, obviously we've known each other. We've been friends. We've worked together. And what we're doing for you is what we do for a lot of people with a lot of different BMWs from all over the country, doing mechanical restoration, also doing cosmetic restoration, and just helping them through the ownership. And that's kind of what we're going to go over today.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I guess that's a good point because honestly, you've educated me quite a bit, especially when we walked around today and learned quite a few things about my own car basically as well. But let's start with this one. So I have a few questions for you, and we can start with the first one, which is why is a pre-purchase inspection critical when buying a classic BMW or any BMW, maybe not just a classic one? Because we all talk about the E46 and M3s and E30s, M3s, but I would say that applies to any car, right?
Yeah, it's really any car, not even BMW. It's really any make and model. It's just when you go out, and there's so many places to buy cars, whether it's Bring a Trailer, whether it's your friend's friend, or whether it's Facebook Marketplace. So much is out there, and when you buy a car, there's a lot to know. And when you buy a car from someone, they may know everything wrong that they're not saying. They may not know everything wrong. They may be completely ignorant to what they needed to do. And a pre-purchase inspection basically hits the reset button on the knowledge of a vehicle so that everyone's at square one. You know the things that are wrong. The owner knows the things that are wrong. And it really just sets the plate. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a deal on the car. It doesn't mean anything. It just is a way to build it's a fact-finding mission, as I like to say, for you on a vehicle. And I see it so much. Vehicles are emotional purchases. So people go to the dealership, they see the car that they've always wanted, maybe in the color that they've always wanted, and they buy the car. And then they bring it in on that Monday after purchasing it on Saturday, super excited, telling me the story. This was the car I always wanted. This is what I needed to do. Can you guys look at it and tell me what you need? And more often than not, we're telling them a lot of information, meaning a lot of things are wrong with the car that they didn't know and that the dealership chose not to divulge or is not a part of what they purchased. And some people that have had cars and gone through this process before are ready, but I would say most are not. And especially with BMW, the maintenance can be very expensive very quickly. And it's tough to be in that position where someone comes in super excited with something and to give them, it's true news. I wouldn't call it bad news, but to a lot of people it is bad news. I mean, and we can use multiple examples that I have, but I mean, it's just to prepare yourself and gather the information. So when you come see a specialist shop like me, you don't get that news that you need 10 grand of work when you bought a $3,000 car. Most people are not prepared for that.
Okay, so let's get into the details because I mean, it sounds great in theory, but essentially if you were to do this on your own first, before you even go to a shop, what are some of the things that you should be looking for when it comes to buying a new car? Maybe hit some of the important ones, not all of them, because of course you can't really see everything unless you take it to a shop and you put it on the lift and really look in detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but along those lines, I mean, if you're buying a car from anybody reputable, including an independent person, or bring a trailer, I mean, most of those people are going to allow you to take it to an independent shop.
Okay.
And I would say that an independent shop like the one we have, there's a lot of them throughout the country. A lot of people doing the same thing that we're doing. They know those cars more so than the dealership knows. Especially older cars, E46 M3s, E36 M3s. Most of those technicians that worked at the dealership that worked on those cars when they were new are no longer there. So the PPI is really important. I mean, another thing you need to look for is you need to look at the Carfax. That's public information that you have to pay for the Carfax. It's like $60 or $40, and that's going to give you the story of the car that's black and white. It's dealerships reporting the information. It's insurance companies reporting the information. So you need to look at the Carfax 100%. There's also a vehicle check as well as another brand of that. And those are the minimum, I would say, minimum things. Another thing you need to be able to do is test drive the car. If you're at a dealership and you're trying to buy a car and they won't let you test drive it, that's definitely a red flag. And I would say if they will not allow you to take it to an independent shop to be inspected, that's also a red flag that I've heard a lot. A lot of people say you can test drive it, but it can't go more than 2 miles away. There's something that they're hiding. So I would stay away from that.
So speaking of red flags, what else can you point out, like as far as red flags that you tell people, hey, you should be looking for this and this?
Like as far as on a specific model?
Let's pick an E46 M3, for example. So let's say it's such a popular M3. Would you say it's the most popular one that you see? Or
I think so. I think it's
so
most popular. Yeah, that's a good way. A lot of I see a lot of ads for E46 M3s that say subframe's been inspected. There's no cracks. You don't need to have the big three. People talk about the big three for the E46 M3, and the big three is the rod bearings, it's the Vanos, and it's the subframe reinforcement. And those are three of the weak points of that vehicle that are easy to fix, costly to fix, but they're something big. And when people say they've had the subframe inspected, they typically have not, because to inspect the subframe, you have to drop the subframe from the vehicle. You have to basically get rid of the undercoating and look at the metal to determine if the subframe is torn like they do. And my argument, and the reason I think most people don't do that, is because the amount of work, it's 8 to 10 hours to do that work. If you're going to go ahead and do all that, you might as well go ahead and reinforce the subframe. So there's catch and keywords that people say that it doesn't really work. But one of the things that I do for a lot of customers is a lot of people will call me before they even bought the car, and they'll ask me these questions. What do I need to do? And I'll tell them, do a PPI, and they'll communicate with me, and I'll help them, guide them kind of through the process so they can get a car that's worthwhile and is in their budget. So when they send it to me, maybe we're not going to be doing the maintenance. We're going to be doing modifications. We're going to be doing brakes or, a CSL airbox or something like that. And that's important, I think, to just ask the questions and gather. You could never have too much information about that car that you want to buy for you to know what's in it. and you definitely need to know that before pulling the trigger and spending, tens of thousands of dollars on something.
Gotcha. When it comes to the engine, let's say on that particular car, the 46 M3, are there any specific tests that you could do to find any hidden issues?
An independent shop could do a Vanos test. It's basically a pass-fail with the ISTA or with the AutoLogic to be able to see if the Vanos is functioning as it should be. There's also a lot of visual. You can also listen to the motor, listen to the S54. Those have really specific valves that have to be adjusted, that have to be shimmed, and the motors are noisier when they're not. So there's some things, and honestly, the people that know the cars, like we know them, there's a lot out there, a lot of the independent shops, and those are the people that are going to know right away the things to look for and advice to give, I would say.
Gotcha. So another question for you is, why is verifying matching numbers like engine, transmission, VIN important for the authenticity and value of classic BMWs? Is this something you see in the US quite a bit? Because I do see it in Europe. I remember stories from Europe where you would have to check the odometer or check the VIN numbers, all of that, because there are a lot of shady things going on. But do you see these often or no?
I mean, on the newer cars, it's really difficult to roll back the mileage, so to speak. But it really varies on the year of the vehicle. When you talk about a 2002 or like a Bavaria, and some of the cars that we see that we're restoring or that I have, the conversation when it comes to ownership and buying those cars is never really about what the odometer is, because those have 5-digit odometers, and when they get to 99,999, they're rolling to zero on those older cars.
Mm-hmm, sure.
On the newer stuff, it's really difficult to modify, the mileage. But I would say that we have there's a way to look up on E46s, on E92s. There's a serial number that's on the engine that is married to the VIN number of the vehicle. And a lot of times when things don't add up, when a car has super low mileage and the engine has a lot of wear, has a lot of things wrong with it, we will cross-reference that number on the engine to the VIN to determine that this is actually the motor that belongs in that car. And when it comes to some of these higher value BMWs and some of these ones that require a lot of maintenance, it is important. It's not something that's easy to check. And I will say that a matching numbers vehicle is a kind of an American term for a lot of American cars because of the value of and street rodding and some of the stuff in the 50s and 60s where people would change the motor a lot. So a lot of people want that originality of the matching number for the matching car. And I think most of the time for classic BMW and most BMWs, it's really not that important. But when you start getting into 3.0 CSLs and when you start looking at some of the Alpina editions of 2002s and E21s, that information is 100% valuable because that's really the only way to cross-reference authenticity of something in that way.
Gotcha. So now let's assume that I purchased an E46 M3. Now I bring it to you, and maybe I come up with a task for you, a chore for you. How do I maintain the uniqueness of this engine? How do I maintain its reliability? Any things that we should be doing to the engine, for example, to make sure that I can enjoy this for many years to come?
Yeah, I would say if we have no history, if there's no history of service or anything with the mechanics, we need to do a Vanos test. We need to check the Vanos and see if it needs to be done, needs to be replaced. There's also some bulletproofing you can do with the cryo hub, with the Vanos, and also the rod bearings. S54s have a story with the rod bearings. They originally came out in 01, and then BMW had a recall on some of the earlier engines, 01, 02, and actually did a rod bearing service, which changed the rod bearings from the factory. But again, that was in 2001. So we're in now 2025. It was 24 years ago. And that's all relevant, but that's another one of the big three that I mentioned earlier in the podcast of the rod bearings. That's super important. And when we change the rod bearings, we use BE, which is a brand that we've used on all of our, the M engines, S65, S85, and S54. That's really important. But another thing is if you brought me a car and all of that was done and you asked me, what are the things to keep me going? That's a normal routine service. It's definitely the oil service, and it needs to be done, I would say, around 5,000 miles is our number that we give out.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry
Sure.
to interrupt you for a second, but I'll give you my example because that's actually a really, really good topic. So on my 1M, basically, I change the oil every year, but I drive only about 1,000 miles. So if I don't drive, 35 or, 5,000 miles or even more, but I keep the car maybe as a garage queen for a year, should I still change my oil?
Yeah, I would say that it's a toss up. I'd say
Okay.
I would. I would probably do it 1 to 2 years and know what the mileage is. But I will say you need to do the brake fluid every year,
Okay.
because it absorbs water as naturally as brake fluid does, and it starts to break down. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize with brake fluid is that it passes through the ABS unit, especially on a 1M or an E92, E46, and the DSC and ABS is connected, and all of the fluid, the hydraulic system, is based on that ABS. And when you have fluid that has water in it that's dirty, it will cause those modules and those systems to go bad. And it's not a cheap module. It's a $1,200-$1,800. So anybody out there that's listening to this and wants to know like what I think the number one thing you need to pay attention to if you have a car you're not really driving is you need to keep you need to keep it on a battery tender, on a C-Tech charger, which is what I always say. I do it with all my stuff, and at least change the brake fluid.
So those are if it's a garage queen, basically, a car that you don't drive much, these will be the things to do. So oil change, brake fluid, and clearly keeping the battery in good
keep
shape.
the battery in good shape, because a lot of the newer cars have multiple modules, 50, 60, 70 modules that all come from that battery, all take from that battery. And when a car sits, when you go to Europe for a month, that car is not being driven. It's sitting there draining that battery. And you're going to get that battery pull. And the newer cars rely on the amperage to work. And we see a lot of cars that are great condition cars. I mean, super low mileage cars. And they come in with 100 codes when we scan them, cars running poorly. And it was only because of the battery.
Gotcha.
Like just that alone.
Sure. So let's go back because I interrupted you for a second. So you mentioned for, things to be watching, as far as regular maintenance. So you mentioned oil change. What else?
I mean, brake fluid, I mentioned too. I think the battery is important. And the reason I say to keep a charger on the battery is to keep the health of the battery. You need to have a good battery in the newer cars. Certain cars rely on the power more, but I would say E chassis, 1M, F chassis, and G chassis rely on that battery, and not having that is going to cause issues for you. I would also say tires is a big one that's overlooked, I think, from a safety perspective on a lot of the cars. A lot of people wear the tires past the wear bars, and it's really important out there that you take, the cars are amazing and they have great safety features, but they're great safety features with proper tires, with proper tread. And when you get weather like we've had today, where it's 40 degrees and rain, if you don't have traction when you're stopping, you could have the best brakes in the world, but if you have no tread and you have no grip, that's something to look forward to.
Preventive maintenance. So let's say that let's look at maybe SMG, DCT, manual, maybe automatic one. Are there any differences in preventive maintenance for all these transmissions? I mean, it's a pretty broad topic, but maybe we can narrow down some.
I mean, you need to, there's a lot of talk out there about manual transmission changing the fluid or not changing the fluid. We tend to stay away from changing the fluid in manual transmissions if there's not an issue. If there's a leak and someone has to be addressed, obviously the fluid has to get changed. But I think that, what we've seen recently on DCTs, E90s specifically, is that there's a lot of leaks going on in the inner seals with the valve bodies inside, which is the computer, which is the solenoid system that is inside the transmission. And there's different seals that divide it away. It's a dry system, divides it away from the fluid. We've seen a lot of those seals fail internally, and then some of the electronic boards get touched with the fluid, and the DCT transmissions go bad. And that would have been caught by a visual inspection. There's actually a little hole in most of the transmissions. You can see up inside in certain areas to give away leaks. So I think another thing that's preventative is just having your car inspected by someone that knows what to look for. Just to give you an idea, it's totally dry, you're good. Or we're starting to see some seepage, we're starting to see some stuff. really be proactive with the vehicle. And before, because if you wait, it's going to be worse. It's going to cost more. It's like your health. I mean, think of it as your health. If you wait to get your physical, you're going to find out more information later, I would say.
So E46 M3 SMG, I guess, not everybody's favorite because of issues, but if you were to do any preventive maintenance on the SMG, would you advise for that, or would you tell people, hey, by the way, you can get a 6-speed manual in this car?
Oh, this is it's a tough topic. I mean, SMG, there's not really preventative maintenance. They have issues with relays on the SMGs, which we have a regiment diagnosis that we do on SMG. And just for the record, I'll say I like SMG in general. Transmissions. When the cars were out, I was lucky enough to have a buddy of mine that had a brand new E46 M3 that was SMG, and I loved it. But over time, SMG degrades. It starts to become slower. It starts to become tougher, and it gets to the point on a lot of these E46 M3s that it leaves people stranded, and it causes a big issue. So we do, at the shop, we do a lot of SMG to manual swaps. And one of the things on the E46 M3, which is super cool, is that the transmission is the same. The physical transmission from SMG to manual is the same. The only difference between them is SMG is a hydraulic operated clutch, like a pedal, like a hydraulic foot pedal, basically. And you can convert the SMG transmission to manual by machining the bell housing, just like a manual. So you put the detents in, it has everything ready to go for a manual. And we're able to do those conversions with all OEM parts, genuine parts from BMW. We can do that. And once you get the car, every module knows it's a manual. Reverse lights work, PDC works, everything works as it's a manual, just like it came from the factory. The only way you would know on those cars that it wasn't a manual is the VIN. The VIN gives away that it had an SMG. But
unless you change the VIN in different parts of the world.
Yeah, of course. But I will say that there is some customers that do really like their SMGs, and we've done full unit replacements on SMG for those customers, and they love it, and they'll still have it to this day. So we do a lot of manual swaps, but we also do a lot of SMG work as well on those cars because it's a love-hate. A lot of people just bash SMG. They have no experience with it. Online, I read a lot of people really not liking it, but it's because, in my opinion, they've never driven a new car with a new SMG unit to really know how it was supposed to be. They've only driven the 20-year-old version of it.
Gotcha. So, a little bit more general topic on this one, but if you were to advise someone on preserving, for example, the factory finish and the interior and all of that, what would be your advice? Not necessarily to the E46 M3, but any BMW that you care about.
Yeah, for me, on all my classic cars, I use a brand. It's a really old brand. It's called Zymol. It's been around forever. It's actually in Florida, and they use all natural ingredients with everything they do, and they have some vinyl coating and cleaners that they use that are super subtle and they seal the vinyl and seal the leather. And I use that on all my original cars because I want to keep a certain originality to them, not make them super shiny. That's a good way to do. But also window tint is another thing that I would say is a great thing on these older cars. And you can get...
Depends where you live.
You're right. Yeah. But in Florida, I'll speak, we have a really aggressive summer here, really hot weather. There's a couple tint out there. There's a brand, 3M. They make a crystalline tint that's clear on the windows. You can't tell that really the car's tinted, but it gets rid of 95, 99% of the UV, which the UV is really what tears interiors down. So I have customers that come to me and they say, I like the fishbowl look of no tint, but it's so hot and I'm worried about my interior. And that's what I tell them to do. Get that tint. It's like 70%. And that's been a game changer. And that really saves your dash from cracking. It saves your door panels from warping. It's a lot of that.
Okay. So let's change gears a little bit and talk about some of the aftermarket upgrades that you could do to a BMW that makes sense. I don't want to just focus on one chassis. I'm going to try to pick the most popular one. So let's stick to, let's say, M3s, E46 M3, E90 M3, F80 M3. I'm assuming these are probably that makes the most sense right now. I guess G80 is too early. But what will be some of the OEM aftermarket upgrade you would do to the car, both to improve performance and reliability? So let's start with E46 M3.
So, I mean, I think for E46 M3,
And make sure you don't want to give too much power to the car also because you want to keep the same driving experience. So you don't want to alter the DNA from the factory.
100%. And I think that that's a big, I mean, that's important you brought that up because, I mean, there's always a line, there's a line in the sand, so to speak, that when you cross that line of modification, it totally changes the car, the dynamics of the car. But I will say that a couple modifications that would apply to E46, E92, F82, we'll say manual transmission M3s because all those are available in a manual. I will say that the tactile stuff that you touch daily and the sound of the car, and I'll be more specific. We do a lot of Alcantara steering wheels, a lot of steering wheel options that there are, whether it's a thicker wheel, whether it's a different grip wheel, Alcantara, shift knob and short shift kit is something that I like a lot. I don't like, me personally, I don't like a super notchy, super short shift. But if you just change it 15, 18%, it gives you that crispness that you need, especially, I would say the E46 has a lot of sloppiness in the shift, I will say. And one of the things with that is, you can fix that with a short shifter, but a short shifter like that and a steering wheel has an impact on you every time you drive. Doesn't matter how fast you're driving, doesn't matter if you're on the track, if you're on the street, changing those adds enjoyment to what you're doing. I think those are super important. And I will say the addition to that, the kind of the three things, the third thing is changing the exhaust, is doing something with the exhaust. And everybody has a different preference for what they want. I always think, and I thought this with the G80, I think it with all the BMWs, they need something. They need a little bit more volume. They need a little bit more tone. And whether that's, a mid-pipe for the G80 or whether that's a muffler for the E46, I think if you do a little bit more sound and you do those tactile things, they will make a huge difference for you. And I will say a fourth thing that's really close to those is doing the suspension. Is doing little suspension work. A lot of the new cars, we do the ALS kit because you get to keep your EDC. One of the things that always bothers me about brand new cars, and when I go to the dealer to pick up parts or I'm there, the wheel gap on the newer cars, even on your 1M, even there's a lot of wheel gap.
Yeah, but that's regulations driven, and I've asked a question. They have to make the car compliant on all the roads in the world. Not everybody's got smooth surfaces, and that's the reason why.
And I understand that, and that makes it. But it doesn't mean
it looks good.
You can't. It doesn't mean you can't fix it for you. And of course, some people have driveways in different places that they can't do that. But I will say a close fourth to the list that I gave is changing the suspension, getting rid of that gap.
Gotcha. So on the sound thing, I mean, we can tease that we're doing something with the 1M as well. We can't really tell the entire project, but there'll be a full YouTube video. So we're going to show you that soon because that's exactly, the idea there too, to improve it a little bit, but not to be overwhelming for the 1M because I still want to keep that pure.
It is. And I'm not going to say any of the details of that, but I mean, that project, that's a great example because it has something on it now. It has something on it now. And
she's loud.
And we're refining it because we're not just taking every single thing off that was on and replacing everything with something else. We're putting some factory stuff on. We're doing a little bit less, I would say, a little bit less parts. But to me, it's a refinement of and a choice you want to make with the car. And I think it's one that you're gonna love. You're gonna love that about it.
Gotcha. So today I was visiting your shops, basically, get a little bit acquainted with what you do here. We've known each other for a while, and I know you're working quite a bit on restoring classic BMW. So that's, big part of your business right now, and you do some industry projects. We've seen also that A58 CSL out of California that you worked on with other companies as well.
Sure.
But let's talk a little bit about that. What are the key challenges of restoring classic BMWs? Maybe if we stay specific to certain engines, maybe like the M10, M20, M30, or any other one that you want to talk about.
I mean, for me, one of the things that I've always wanted to be a part of with these projects is keeping a part of whatever the project that we're doing authentic. in the way that it comes across with this stuff. So if you go back to, if you talk about engine, but if you talk about the car that had an M10, it's a 2002. 2002s came with the M10s. A lot of people do different motors in those cars. They do S14s, which is the E30 M3 engine. There's a couple other engines. And to me, when you think about a process, you think about a car, we talk about the period of the car and being period correct, which is a joke that Horacio always laughs about with me.
So the inside joke is that within every single video that Sean makes, videotapes, shoots, whatever, there is always a period correct reference right there, and it's very neat.
Yeah, it's neat. Yeah. But we were at BMW. To set the record, we were at BMW Classic.
Everything was period correct.
Correct. It was, and it needed to be. But I will say that getting back to what you were saying is, I always want to bring some authenticity to the build and not go crazy with what we're doing. Now, with the 858 project, for example, Ray, who's a good friend of mine, and asked me to help and consult on some of the things that were done. On paper, it's kind of a crazy build. It's a V10 out of the
so it's not more of a restoration. It's more of
it's a resto mod.
Yeah, it's the mod.
But there was a lot of, but if you look really deep into that project, there's a lot of authenticity with BMW because of the, John Sybil doing the design on the outside and wanting to keep the 8 Series look. Like the one thing about that project is that it's a wide body, it's a full carbon body, it's all these things. But if any BMW person sees it, they know it's an 8 Series. And to me, that's the authenticity that you keep. It's those elements. And that's like anything with modifications that we're doing in some of these restorations is, we have E30s that we're putting S52s in, later M3 engines, but we're keeping the look of the 80s look on the outside. So you would never know that engine is in that car, because when it drives by, it's just a really nice E30. But inside is that engine that really makes the car better. So to me, it's like you don't want to cross that line of that authentic nature of it. And it really, to me, it ruins the build.
But let me ask you this. So this is more of a resto mod that you mentioned, like you said earlier. But what if I have a E30 M3 and I want to restore it to factory, basically? So everything has to be OEM parts. There has to be high quality and all of that. How do you find these parts and how do you source them? I guess the E30 wouldn't be too bad, but if you go even maybe 2002, then that becomes a little bit harder, maybe even harder for the previous ones.
Yeah, every model, has its challenges, I will say. I have a lot of buddies in the industry, a lot of guys that have a lot of cars that hoard the parts, for lack of a better word. And I just basically get on the horn with them and tell them what I need. And between the network that I have and just doing the classic work and just knowing the people, I can always pretty much find anything that I'm looking for. And that's regards to the E30. Some of the E30 parts are available and you can buy them from the dealer.
That's what I was thinking right now. What's the time frame that they have to keep the parts in stock? 30 years or
it's
more?
15. I think it's 15 or 20 is on the story. There's exceptions to that rule.
Okay.
The Z8 is an exception. They have a 50-year parts rule. Yeah. And I will say, we're doing a Z8 right now. And that car is a 2004. It's over 20 years old, and every part I ordered was available in Germany. And every part, little tiny knobs and steering racks and differentials, and every part I looked up, there was no pushback. And I'm used to doing some of these E36 projects where I put in an order for 100 parts and 25, 30 of them come back as NLA, and NLA means no longer available, meaning you cannot order the part anymore from BMW. But with the Z8, it was none were NLA, and we're all getting them from BMW. So it really depends on the chassis. There's been times that I've restored cars that I've had to buy another car that had the parts that I needed. The Neue Classic cars that I have, the 1800s and 1800 Ti's, there is no parts anywhere for those cars. And in order for me to get certain things that I need to complete a car, I have to basically buy another car for that purpose to get the parts. It's pretty difficult.
Yeah. I guess what's also quite interesting that we had a conversation with the BMW Classic in Munich recently, and I believe they're mentioning the BMW Garmisch concept that they had to themselves go to eBay to source some of the original parts because they didn't have them anymore.
Yeah, I do that all the time. eBay is a great source. You need to know the part. You need to know when one is worn too bad. You need to know what you're looking at. But eBay has been a great source, and I'll be honest. I mean, when we built the E91 project, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, that was the project that we built for Bilstein in Turn 14 last year for SEMA. That was E91 wagon, and black interior for E91 is very rare. And we were doing an M3 interior black, and there was probably 30 plastic pieces that I needed to buy that were no longer available from BMW that I bought off of eBay.de. I bought from the UK. I bought from the US, and they would all come in these random boxes and be wrapped up. And it was the way that I got everything I needed for that.
Gotcha. So that's on the restoration side, the restaurant side as well. But how do you strike a balance in between, let's say, when you do a restaurant project, like you mentioned, in between, keeping the classic BMW driving feel or maybe look and feel and all of that while you're still upgrading some of the things? You mentioned the suspension a little bit, all of that, but is there anything else that you look at to maintain that balance and not overdo it?
Yeah, I would say that one of the real sticking points for me on some of the newer chassis cars that we're modifying and that we're doing, and when I say newer, I mean F chassis cars, is the clutch. When you have a manual car, putting in a racing or super sport clutch in that car changes the weight of that pedal and changes the driving dynamic of the car. And in my opinion, it ruins that, because BMW really gets that right with the way the pedal feels and the interaction with the shifting. And in my opinion, when you put in those heavy clutches, which you need to make certain power levels, you're changing the dynamic of the vehicle. So that's my line in the sand. We did a F chassis. We did a M2 competition for a customer that had a really nice. We did a video on my YouTube about it. 3D design, bunch of 3D design parts. Really great vehicle. We did seats in it, and he wanted it to be a lot faster than it was. And he said, "What's the line here? Like, we can make a ton of power. Maybe we'll build a motor." I said, "No." I said, "The line is the torque limit of the clutch to keep that dynamic of a stock vehicle, because." You throw the keys to your wife and say, "Hey, go drive," or to someone else that's not used to that heavy clutch, it ruins the car, in my opinion. So we can craft cars on the dyno, and Kerry Jordan at Jordan Tuned is one of the tuners that we use almost exclusively here. And he has the ability to be able to make the torque and make the car work. And he knows the clutch's torque limits. So we can tune a car and dial it in so that it will make the most power on a factory clutch, to where it's a stock car. When you want to get on it, you can. And to me, that's a line for that.
So question for you, how often customers get in trouble when they upgrade the car too much, it's still under warranty with BMW, and then they go to the dealership for an issue with the car? Do you see that often? Like, let's say like the car behind us got 1,000 horsepower. If something happens to the engine, maybe that's not related to the power upgrade, and you go to the dealer. Have you heard of situations where they've been denied warranty claims?
I mean, all the time. I mean, the guy behind me is a fully built engine, so he's never would step foot into BMW with that. But I'll talk about it on the new cars.
But let's say like
M5s, G80s,
something like that. You maybe you're adding 100 horsepower just through the ECU tuning, so no other additional parts.
Yeah, so BMW is real stickler now on warranty. Okay. They are plugging in every vehicle, whether it's there for an oil change or whether you're doing, hey, my seat has a tear in it, I want you guys to inspect it for a replacement seat. They're going to plug your car in, and if you have modifications, they're going to know, and they're going to avoid that warranty. BMW's been really specific with that.
Interesting.
It used to be kind of a under the radar type of thing. Like, I've been doing this a long time, and we used to do a lot of modifications for cars. And as long as the customer brought it in and it didn't need like an engine or a transmission, BMW would really be fine with it. They wouldn't cause a big ruckus. But as soon as the turbo cars came in, N54 owners like yourself, Horacio, modified N54s, and BMW paid for a lot of work on those motors on modified cars, and BMW just stepped in and said, we're paying too much money on cars that we shouldn't have to, and they started sticking it. So that's kind of where it is with that. But there's been situations where, and to me, I'm a very black and white person with the way that I do my business, and I'll speak for myself with maintenance. I tell somebody every single thing the car needs, because again, it's a fact finding. You know what's wrong, you can make a plan to fix it, or you can fix everything. Modifications are the same way. People come in all the time to me and say, I have a new G80. I love the car. I really want to make more power, but I want to keep the warranty. That's really a question I get. And there's two answers. Like, if you modify it with a tune to make more horsepower, the warranty is going to be voided by BMW. There's not really a way to dance around that. One of the things that we offer at the shop is Carbon is a company that's Steve Dinan's company. When he sold the Dinan name, he started Carbon, and we were a Dinan dealer, and they came to us, and we're one of those dealers. And one of the things that we offer is we offer tuning with their warranty, and their warranty actually replaces BMW's drivetrain warranty, matches the same time frame of the factory warranty to be able to have that. And that's really the only thing I can offer, because the truth is, no matter what any other shop or tuner tells you, if you modify that DME with a piggyback, with a tune, an ECU tune, whatever you're doing, the warranty will get voided. You could avoid it for a little bit of time, I think, but it's something that's going to happen. And I tell people that. But little modifications, like doing an exhaust, like if you wanted to put an Akrapovic on a new G80, if you're doing little modifications with the suspension, that's not going to avoid the drivetrain warranty of a BMW, and you can pretty much go around. So like there's choices you have to make with the car. If you want that BMW warranty and you feel comfortable with that, there's modifications you can do. They're minor, but they will change. And some of the things I named to make the car better, you can put a muffler on the car. It's not going to avoid the warranty. You can change the steering wheel. It's not going to avoid the warranty. Short shifter is the same way, to make the car better and keep that.
Sure. Got it. So you mentioned the N54 Clio engine that, equally loved and hated. Drives great, sounds great. Lots of issues with turbos and fuel pump and all of that. But what are some of the advanced maintenance techniques or maybe things that you do to these cars to prevent, carbon buildup and all the other things?
I mean, N54 specifically need to be walnut blasted.
Okay.
There's a specific tool from BMW to do that. He uses, a wall.
How often though? Or is there a time? I would say frame, or it is a mileage.
It really depends. I mean, modified ones that are running more fuel with upgraded fuel needs it more. I would say, a good rule of thumb is like 30, 40,000 miles. It needs to be looked at. You can actually look inside the intake manifold and see how built up it is. But that causes running issues. It'll cause, false check engine lights and different things. And it's a service we've offered since day one, because that's been an issue on those motors from when the car was new. And we have the BMW factory tool in order to do that. But I would say the N54 is unique in that way, where other engines are not really, because BMW changed the way the design was on that to really not have as much of that buildup.
Are there any other advanced maintenance tips that you could share
on N54 specifically, or
maybe let's pick some of them? I mean, there's so many BMWs, motors. So many different models. But let me ask you this: what's the most popular engine that you usually see? I mean, we talked about E46 M3, so clearly, aside from that one.
I mean, I say regular
S55 right now.
Regular engines that we're seeing. I
N55.
mean, S50. We can talk about S55. S55.
Do you see more than the S58 right now? The S55, or
I would say so. Okay. We're doing a lot more modifications.
Okay, so let's pick the S55 maybe, because it's relatively new, but not old enough to be not reliable, I guess, or maybe.
Well, I'll put it in a different way. I mean, for everyone to know, S55 is from 2015 and up. It's an F chassis M engine, which was an M2, M3, M4. All the way up to the G80. Yeah. It's a great engine. BMW raced with that motor. It's a great engine. It has specific things that go wrong. One of them being the crank hub, which is a known pretty big issue on those.
Okay.
And it's basically on the crankshaft, there's a hub that's on the belt system, and basically the torque of the engine will turn the crank, and it will move the timing chain and be out of time. It's an issue with those motors, and we've seen it across the board. We've seen it on stock S55 with elderly owners. I bring that up because people have brought us cars totally stock. We've seen it on highly modified cars. And there's different ways that the crank hub fails. It could fail all the way, and that it's an interference motor, so the timing is off so much that it damages the motor internally. Most of the time, it just jumps a little bit, and it throws a code for it, and we're able to fix it. We do the crank hub service. I would say we do a couple a month. That's a big job. You have to drill the crank. We use a 4-pin hub from my friends over at Evolve in the UK. They developed a 4-pin hub, a new crank hub that they use, which installed, and that basically bulletproofs that part of the S55. But another issue that we see is the charge coolers on S55s, which is those are water to air intercooled engines, and they have a charge cooler that sits on the top of the motor, and the charge cooler fails internally, and it leaks coolant internally, and it leaks right into the J pipe into the motor. So and you don't know it. And the only way you know that that's going on is it has a separate reservoir, a charge cooler reservoir, that when it gets low, it throws a check engine light. And we've seen customers with bad motors because they've leaked so much coolant in it, and it causes rod bearing failure. And I remember, coolant is not supposed to be inside the motor, and it really causes havoc. And it's one of those things now that every time we have a car in with an S55, we tell the owner we're going to check it, and we can tell by taking the J pipe off the back of the engine, and if it has residue from the coolant leaking, they're having a failure of that, and that can be a catastrophic issue with those cars. That's something that you need to do if you have that engine. You need to have that looked at, and we typically change it to an aftermarket nicer manifold, because BMW they don't have an updated part number to correct that. You can put a new charge cooler on, but it will fail again. So we put CSF is one of the ones that we run almost exclusively. There's another brand called Wagner that we also use that fixes that problem. So one of the cars at the shop today was on the lift. There was an F82 there, and we're basically bulletproofing that engine. And that leads me to another topic that I think we have down to talk about. But maintenance on some of these high performance M3 M4 is a foundation of modification. You need to build the foundation of the maintenance and the foundation of a strong engine and a reliable engine before you start tuning it, before you start modifying it. And that's one of the journeys I take customers on. And to bring up a different car, E92 M3, people want to supercharge those, make 600 horsepower plus with a supercharger. But I have caveats to even do that. I tell people you need to do the rod bearings on that motor because when you supercharge a motor, you're increasing the oil temp and you're increasing the wear on the motor. You need to do rod bearings. That motor also has throttle actuators. It has valve covers that need to be done. And when you put a supercharger on, you're putting a lot more parts in the engine bay, and it makes all the regular maintenance after the fact way more expensive. So when a customer brings me an E92 M3 and they say, I want to do a supercharger, I'm going to say, we need to look at the car and do all the maintenance, either at the same appointment that we're installing the supercharger, and we'll complete that stuff first, so that you have a reliable S65 that then you're going to make more power with. And that's something people need to think about, that when they're going to do these modifications to whatever generation it is, you need to check and make sure your radiator is good. You need to make sure all that stuff is there, because you're going to have a better time. You're trying to have fun, and that's part of what we're trying to do. I mean, having fun modifying a car and making more power is for fun. And if you don't do it the right way, it's not going to be fun.
Okay, so let's take it to the basics though, because we should have started with that. Maybe you mentioned foundation and all of that, but not everybody's into modifying cars, and that's fair. I mean, there's a large amount of people, I guess it's fair to say, that they're not interested in changing anything on their cars. But for these people, I guess the foundation of all of this maintenance really starts with breaking in an engine, right? So let's take, for example, the new G80, G82, S58, brand new engine. If a new customer calls you and says, hey, how do I properly break in this engine to avoid any potential issues down the road before you even get to the preventive maintenance and all of that? I mean, I guess this is preventive maintenance in many ways. If you
can think of it like that. I mean, the thing about
what's the sequence? That's mostly what I'm interested in.
I mean, there's a lot of schools of engine break-in. Some of the race guys.
Just share yours, because I'm sure everybody's got an opinion on this.
Yeah,
I've
course,
seen
but
plenty.
I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of, and I'll speak for myself when I say, I mean, for me, breaking in an engine is not doing 100% throttle right out of the gate. It's changing RPMs constantly. It's not, if I tell you, hey, this is a brand new motor and we need to put 1,000 miles on it, the worst thing you could do is go get on I-10 and drive 1,000 miles at one speed, because when you're driving at one speed, that's one oil pressure. It's different. It's one load on the engine, and really to break in an engine properly, you want to have all different loads. You want to have all different RPMs, all different throttle input. All of that needs to vary. So all the parts of the engine are doing everything they need to do, and it simulates all driving factors, basically, the way the engine is going to live at all RPMs and at everything. And that's what you need to do during break-in. And if you read any of the literature from BMW or from Porsche on that, they will say those basics. And that's what I kind of give to customers. And customers do send me cars to break in, when we're doing a new motor, and part
it's
of
a lot of driving.
It's a lot. It's a lot of driving. And it can
how many miles? I mean, how many miles do you need for a G80 to break it in properly? Let's say.
Well, the BMW has a break-in on the new cars of 1,200 miles, and that's really for the differential, is what they say.
Okay.
The differential has a temporary fluid in it that they change at the 1,200 mile, but you're also doing the engine. And I will say that I think 1,200 is a good number. Porsche, on some of their GT cars, has a random 932 mile number that they put. I don't know what was on your Cayman.
Don't recall, because I followed the procedure on online, which was a little bit different. Like first 200 miles, only rev it up to 3K, then go to 3,500, 4K, so on and so forth. It was something.
It's all a different way of explaining what I was saying, though. You don't want to go and be at one speed.
I'm not at the red line yet.
You need to vary. You need to vary, and I will say that that's important. But a lot of the higher dollar engines that we'll do from Carbon, some of these stroker motors on the V10 and stroker motors on the V8 and S54. We'll do the break-in on the streets here around the shop before it goes to a customer, or we can also do it on our dyno as well, to break in those motors, because a lot of things change. A lot of things break in, and some things change that need to be, really looked at when you're doing that.
So, 1,200 miles, you go to the dealer, they change the differential fluid, but do they change the oil as well? I don't remember if they change the oil. And if they don't, do you recommend doing an oil change or not?
I do. I recommend doing an oil change. They normally do not do it. Okay. I would say.
And why?
I think that they're just wanting to do it at the 7. I think
why would they change the oil? Like, why would you recommend changing the oil?
Because typically when you have new engine components, they tend to break in a little bit, and you have higher shaving content. Typically when you change oils on really any of these motors that we're discussing, there's some glitter in the oil. You can see some metal in there. And I would say on a newer motor, it's best to change that oil quickly. I wouldn't say you have to do it at 1,200, but I would say probably if it was my car, I think when I had my M2 and my M3, I took it in at the dealer. They did the diff, and then I think I put another 800 miles on it, around 2,000 miles, and we changed the oil for the first time.
All right, so before we get to the end of the podcast, lots of information, very informative, hopefully, for everyone. Definitely learned quite a few things. Let me ask you this. What was your favorite project you've worked on, aside from the A50 ACSL, which got probably the most press recently?
Yeah, so I'll give you two answers. I mean, the first project that's not the 858 that I worked on was the E91 that I was able to do.
The M3 Touring.
The M3 Touring project that we did.
We drove that one,
with Turn 14. And the reason I say that it's my favorite is because, and one of the reasons I took on the project was I was allowed to do some of the things the way that I would do it, as if it was my car, which is always something that I bring into a lot of these projects with customers, because I'm so obsessed with all of this stuff, like a super nerd for every little detail, that, when Daryl at Turn 14 came up with the idea to build the car, he let me do certain things with the paint and certain things with the interior that I wanted to do. And to me, that's great, because it adds a challenge for me, and it adds that individuality and the specialness of the car in some of the details. And
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and one of those, I'll tell you a couple of the details in that project was the paint. We painted the whole entire car fire orange, which is the GTS color, but the way that I wanted the paint to be done is the point of the project was people were supposed to think that this car was built by BMW. So when we did the paint, when I sat down with Brad, I told him I want orange peel on the car, just like BMW would have painted it, because, you know, it's very easy to paint a whole car and do it like glass, do it like we're at Pebble Beach and we're seeing some of those restorations. But anybody that knows cars, anybody that knows E92s knows that if they see an E92 from across the parking lot with glass paint, they know the car's been painted. And I didn't want people to know the car was painted. I want them to thought that this was made at the factory. So we painted it with orange peel. So it was actually reduced amount of orange peel from factory because Brad thought it was too much on the cars, but it was there. Another thing we did is we kept all the surfaces in the engine bay and in the hatch a matte or satin finish, just like the factory did. Because in my opinion, people will over restore and over paint things and put gloss because they think it looks nice and that's their preference to do. But in a car like that, you're going to open up the engine bay, and if you have an E92 M3, you're going to notice right away that the engine bay is gloss when it was supposed to be matte. So we did it satin. We elevated a little bit and made it still have that difference. And to me, that was, again, that authenticity of that build that I got to bring to it. There were some other things I did in the interior that I wanted to do that we did. We tied in the rear seats with the BMW performance seats of the period. We matched the way that
correct.
Yep, we matched the scalloping that the front seats had, and that was a detail that I did that I thought if BMW made this car and you could order a BMW performance interior, they would have made it match their seats. So, you know, that's why that was my favorite.
Gotcha. Did you ever have a customer that came to you with a blank check and said, "I want to do this project, you know, blank check, do whatever you want"?
Yeah, I have a customer, very recent customer that's done that, and we have a project which I'm not going to talk about any of the details about now.
Coming this year or next year?
It's coming next year.
Okay.
That is one of those approaches. And again, and the cool thing about...
How exciting is that for you? Like basically when somebody trusts you fully and gives you like a blank check and says, you know...
To me, the excitement isn't the blank check part of it.
I mean, not the monetary side. The monetary side. It's more like the trust side.
It's the collaboration. Yeah. I mean, the particular customer that I'm discussing, you know, him and I collaborate on things. He has some ideas of things that he would want, and he asks me thoughts, and he studies other cars that have been done, and we have a great relationship in that way. He respects my opinions too, and also he's brought some great ideas that I would never have thought of to the projects that we've done and that we're still working on that are going on right now. And to me, I mean, that's the best thing. And that again, I mean, we're talking about modifications and we're talking about big projects right now, but I would say that even on the maintenance and the restoration stuff that we're doing, the best projects are the collaborations. And I mean, you know, I told you, and to me, it's great. I mean, you're a friend of mine, Horacio, and I was telling you and educating you about the 1M and the way that I told you about everything on there and why it needs to be done, and this is how we do it, is the way that, you know, I told you all that stuff because I want you to be educated about your car. And that's how I feel about all the other customers. I want it to be able to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and I want them to have that knowledge on why they did it, so they feel like they're getting value out of what we're doing into their car.
All right, so let's end with some personal questions. We're going to do like a fireside or a fire rapid, not fireside, fire rapid questions.
Rapid fire.
Or rapid fire, rapid fireside chat. I was thinking of a fireside chat. I don't know why. We did a lot of chats today.
We need a fireplace in here.
We need
it's
a fireside chat. So let's do some quick questions and answers. So what was your first BMW?
E36 M3 sedan.
What's your favorite BMW that's not a classic BMW? One that you would want to own today, money no object.
The new CSL, the 3.0 CSL special model that they made.
Okay, so let's dial this back a little bit. So let's choose a realistic one, maybe that a lot of people could actually buy. What would be your favorite BMW today that's not considered a classic BMW? And what I mean by classic, I'm thinking like 2002s and 3.0 CSL, maybe something from the modern era.
G80.
G80, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great daily. Okay. Does everything you want it to do. It can make 800 horsepower if you want. You could also keep it stock. It's just a great car all around.
Gotcha. So the next question was, if money no object, I guess the 3.0 CSL, that'll be the one.
Well, I mean, of any BMW made, it would be one of the original carbureted CSLs.
Gotcha.
The ultra lightweights.
Not the M1? Not the
as they're
M1?
called. No,
interesting.
it'd be the ultra lightweights. I just love the E9, and I think that those are just so cool because they're before M, those cars, and there was just an idea and execution to make a car super light and go race, and I think it's just super cool.
Yeah, that was my next question. Also, what would be your favorite classic BMW from the old times? But I guess that answers the question right there.
It does, but I think also that those are $500,000. That's a $500,000 car because there was only 67 of them made. But a more realistic classic that I love is the new class of the Neue Classic cars, which 1800 Ti. They're kind of a forgotten car. It's a four. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, that's a 4-door. What's this 4-door 2002?" Looks very similar, but it's it's a car that predates the 2002s. And it's a car that I loved, and I have like about 9 other people that like those cars in the country that I know, and we all love those cars. They're just super special.
What would be the one project, one classic BMW that you like to work on? Let's say if you could restore any classic BMW, what would it be?
Restore? Any?
Restore. Not restore, not restore, no improvement, just restoring the car. Let's like somebody comes to you and says, I want to have the most pristine M1 or 507 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think for me, challenge wise, it would be one of the ones that would be very challenging, like an M1 or like a 507. Dirk de Groen, who's the president of BMW Classic Car Club, he has a 507 that he sent back to the company that originally made the wood bucks to make the original cars, because he had to have that body work done. And that's a commitment unlike any other of money, but it's also the time. It's years and years to have a restoration like that done. And for the only purpose of, obviously for you, but it's also to have another 507 on the road when there's really not many of those. Sure. That's super cool.
Gotcha. Now, as far as PSI, if I'm a Porsche owner, Mercedes owner, Audi owner, do you turn me around if I show up to your shop and I want to do something to my car?
No. We over the years, a lot of people that are BMW and were BMW people graduate, I'd say, into other cars. Porsche, especially, Lamborghinis, some other Ferraris and stuff. And
so you actually get this through here, basically, where you work on.
We do, and it's a comfort level. I mean, to be honest, it's a comfort level thing. I mean, I have some of the technicians that work for me, that have worked for me for many years. Adam, who's in some of our videos for the E91, he built the E91. He has a history with Lamborghini and with Super Trofeo cars, and he knows those engines. And so we've done some supercharged R8s. We're doing a twin turbo Storado as well. And that really comes from the comfort. Of course, like I can say yes to everyone, but I just don't, because we need to feel comfortable with what we're doing, that we can execute. But yeah, we work on some Porsches. We've done some G-Wagons. We have a GTR, a Mercedes GTR. Mm-hmm. We work on an S65. I mean, we're doing those specialty projects, but it comes from me wanting to do it and my guys being comfortable working on it. And if those things line up, then 100%.
I agree with you. It's better to be good at one thing than okay-ish at many things.
Of course.
So yeah. Well, Sean, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time. Lots of information. I guess we'll do some follow-ups on this podcast. I mean, there's a lot more that we can talk about. I guess, to tease the future podcast, we can probably pick another popular BMW, maybe not an M car. Maybe we pick a regular 3 Series or something that's popular, and things that we see on the road all day long, and issues that customers deal with, and we can talk about this as well in the future. Yeah,
and I think that if you were to reach out to some of the people that really follow BMW and have these cars, maybe they have some questions they can send in, and I can answer for them and give them my opinion on what they're doing. I think that'd be great. But thanks a lot.
We'll open the floor. Yeah, we'll open the floor. Maybe there's some questions, and we'll do a follow-up with just answering the fireside chat questions.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you once again, guys. Once again, thanks for watching here from PSI in Florida, and stay tuned for the next one.